President Trump says his highly anticipated meeting with Russia's President Vladimir Putin will happen next Friday in Alaska. According to Bloomberg News, a reported ceasefire proposal could allow Russia to keep Ukrainian territory it captured during the more than 3 years of war. For tonight's interview, we welcome back Charles Kupchan, senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Charles, thanks for joining us. I'm sure you're, like the rest of us, still trying to get your arms around this latest news about the meeting a week from today. What's your reaction to the headlines here that the two presidents will sit down?
You know, a little bit of whiplash in the sense that when Trump first came to office, he was Putin's best friend and he was throwing President Zelensky of Ukraine out of the Oval Office. Then Trump flips and he says, okay, Putin's not playing ball. He's in some ways mocking me because I speak to him on the phone, and then he launches 600 drones that same night. Now Trump seems to be flipping back and saying, I'm going to have a face-to-face meeting with Putin in Alaska next Friday, and a ceasefire and peace deal looms on the horizon. So it's very difficult to make sense of where we are. One could only hope that when Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, was in Moscow a couple of days ago, he made progress. He made sure that Putin was really willing to make some concessions. Otherwise, there doesn't really seem to be much reason to fly to Alaska and have a face-to-face meeting.
Before we get to the ceasefire proposal, as these things go, heads of state sitting down to discuss highly sensitive issues, this doesn't feel like a whole lot of time compared to other summits we've seen. Does that strike you at all as something that will bear keeping an eye on, just how quickly this has all come together?
Yeah, but, you know, this is kind of par for the course for Trump. If you remember, in his first term, he suddenly flies off and he meets Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. Nobody had really done any homework to prepare, and the meeting really didn't produce anything except ill will. Now we have a meeting set up in relatively short order. And I do think that Trump has to be careful here, because giving a meeting to Putin is a win for Putin. Putin has been in the penalty box. In some ways, Trump is bringing Putin in from the cold, right? He's putting Putin back at the table with the big boys. He better be able to get something big out of Putin, because he's giving something big by agreeing to meet face-to-face with Putin and bringing him in from the cold.
All right, let's just look at what Bloomberg's reporting about this proposed ceasefire deal. How realistic is what Bloomberg is reporting?
Well, we just don't know the details. I think in broad strokes, what's on the table makes sense, which is you have a ceasefire in place. Maybe you swap some territories, those that Russia holds in regions called Kharkiv and Sumy, for those parts of the 4 regions that Russia has formally annexed. You do a little land swap there. And then the key question that we just don't have any insight on is what happens to the 80% of Ukraine that is on the other side of that ceasefire line. Putin keeps talking about demilitarization and denazification, i.e., I want the rest of Ukraine to be my vassal state. That is a deal breaker for Ukraine. It's a deal breaker for Europe. So we need more detail, more granularity about what Trump is going to ask Putin to agree to when it comes to the status, the security, the sovereignty of the 80% of Ukraine that is still free.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. But Charles Kupchan, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your insight.